They seem far away. Don't they?
I have nothing to do with it.
That's all right.
You
There's
ready?
Councilmember James
Ready to
Brown.
go? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. And to those who are visiting, welcome to Lexington. Although it may appear there's a mayor and two secretaries of transportation up here, in reality, what you have is three mayors, right? I'm delighted to welcome former mayor of Lexington and now our Kentucky Secretary of Transportation, Jim Gray, and former mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and now U.S. Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, to Lexington. We can all agree being mayor is a great job, right? Mayors get opportunities to work with people throughout the community. Building partnerships is an important part of a mayor's job. Today is certainly an example of that. In preparation, the application for the grant we are announcing today, we worked with neighbors who live near North Broadway Railroad overpass. We worked with the Biden administration and again want to thank Secretary Buttigieg. And we worked with our congressional delegation who supported our application in Washington, D.C. Thank you to Senator McConnell and Representative Barr. I'd like to welcome their representatives who are here with us today. We also worked with R.J. Corman, our hosts today. Their company wrote a letter in support of our plan to improve the overpass. Ray Goss, president of the R.J. Corman Railroad Company, is here today representing the company. Where are you? There you are. Thank you so much. We worked with the Urban County Council who approved matching funds, and several members are here today. Will you give a, yep. And Secretary Gray, we worked with the state, which is managing this project. The city and the state frequently collaborate on road projects. Everything from snow removal to major projects like this one. It is a team effort. Mayors also get to thank visitors bearing gifts. Thank you again, Secretary Buttigieg, for this grant and this gift. This project is a huge step forward for our city. It addresses problems that we've had for decades. This funding will make a huge difference to people in the neighborhoods who want to walk or cycle through the underpass. There's nowhere to do that right now. It will also clear up traffic issues for those who use North Broadway to travel between downtown and the interstate. This is a major arterial that has dealt with traffic snarls for years because of flooding or trucks actually stuck under the overpass. Secretary Gray and Secretary Buttigieg, you both know that the mayor's office is where the rubber meets the road when it comes to problem solving. Thank you both for helping Lexington solve a huge problem right here. Now it is my distinct pleasure to welcome Secretary Gray to the podium. And many of us still, of course, remember the 8 years he served as our mayor, and before that as a council member at large and vice mayor. So we welcome you to the podium.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to
Thank
see
you.
you.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks, Mayor. Thank you so much. The mayor is accurate and right when she says mayors know just a little bit about these issues. And this is one that I have driven past and under this railroad crossing for many, many years. And it's great to see, you know, today we're crowding the winter circle with the Secretary Buttigieg here and so many others. It's great to see all the council members here. And I'm going to come back to Council Member James Brown in just a minute. So y'all have to forgive me because I'm going to pick on him here in a minute. Yes, I am. I also want to recognize right out of the gate Susan Oatman. Susan, where are you? Hold your hand up. Susan is our grant writer for the Transportation Cabinet, and but for Susan, except for Susan, we probably all wouldn't be here today. So that is an applause line. Thank you, Susan. This project is a project where our governor literally was relentless. Every time he saw Secretary Buttigieg, even at the White House, he said, "Now, Secretary, we've got this project in Lexington on North Broadway, and we need your help." But it's a great example of, as the mayor said, of partnerships, of people working together. It's a great example of the Biden administration's bipartisan infrastructure law that's being used in some very strategic ways today to better the lives of everyday people. Now, a lot of attention, of course, has been paid, and rightly so, to the big projects, what's called the mega projects, as Secretary Buttigieg describes them, such as the Brent Spence Companion Bridge, the corridor project between Covington and Cincinnati. The bipartisan infrastructure law has allowed us to finally get that project off the drawing board. But, you know, equally important, and this is what the Secretary has emphasized so much, and the Governor has emphasized so much, equally important are the smaller scale projects that address neighborhood level infrastructure needs. Projects that will, in many cases, rectify historical inequities that past development created, and in that process touch the lives of people who must deal with those inequities every single day. Secretary Pete, having been a mayor, as Mayor Gorton said earlier, he knows firsthand the importance of projects like Northland, Arlington. And for residents of the Northland and Arlington neighborhoods, having sidewalks and bike lanes on North Broadway is going to make life different. Fixing the problem of chronic street flooding when it rains on North Broadway is going to make life better. Having safe access to restaurants, groceries, and critical social services like drug treatment, a health clinic, and an employment office on and around North Broadway is going to make life better. I was in a good cadence there, y'all. Forgive me. Now, Councilmember James Brown knows these issues firsthand. I said I was going to pick on him, and I didn't let you down. This project was a priority for him. He went to Washington, along with Kevin Atkins and others. He went to Washington to appeal to the Secretary's office for this project. And I remember talking to him the day before and giving him a little advice, none of which, of course, he listened to. But nevertheless, he succeeded. Many of those who live in the Northland and Arlington neighborhoods do not have their own transportation. This is what James said. They have to walk, and they're usually walking to access a vital service. James Brown said this. He tells me that he looks forward to the day when they will be able to get to the services they need without having to, quote, jump and dodge cars in the middle of the road. Thank you, James Brown. That was an applause line too, y'all. Thank you. Earlier today in Jackson, and I'm coming around the bend here because I'm going to introduce the Secretary in just one second. Earlier today in Jackson, Secretary Pete talked about another RAISE grant project to fix problems with the stability of Panbow Lake Dam in Jackson, Breathitt County. Knowing that the dam is going to be stabilized and reinforced, avoiding a future flood catastrophe is going to make life better for the residents of Jackson. So, the bipartisan infrastructure law is not only about interstate highways and big bridges over mighty rivers, important as they are. It is also about equipping the states and local governments with sorely needed funding with which to meet their infrastructure needs. And now, as they say, without further ado, let me introduce a fellow who's traveled quite a ways to get here to be with us today. He's my friend, he's your friend, he's Kentucky's friend, he's Lexington's friend, and that is the United States Department of Transportation Secretary, the Honorable Pete Buttigieg.
Well, thank you very much, Secretary. It's a pleasure to be with you. As the Secretary mentioned, we became friends back when we were both members of the Community of American Mayors, which I don't think is a community you ever leave. And I think that mayor's eye view is part of why he has been such an excellent leader for Kentucky transportation under Governor Beshear's leadership, and why so many great things are happening across Kentucky. And I want to compliment Mayor Lorton on not just this project, and I'll get into this more in a little bit. This is a very competitive process, and so the community's got a lot to be proud of. But also just on all the good things that we see happening here in Lexington, and the good work that's going on as this community moves into the future. And I want to just express my appreciation for the opportunity to be here, to personally offer my forgiveness for what you all did to my Fighting Irish in the Elite Eight in 2015, and let you know that almost a decade later, I'm almost over it. And I want to thank our hosts with R.J. Corman as well. This is a great place to be able to emphasize the importance of this work. Just before we get into the celebration, I do need to take a moment to echo the President's words a little bit ago concerning the Supreme Court's action on affirmative action. It is so important for our country to move in the direction of fairness and inclusion, and to deny colleges and universities the freedom to consider factors like race when they are choosing among qualified applicants is a step backward for our country. But I also believe and know and expect that institutions of higher education will continue to find ways to make sure that the future is more and not less inclusive, so that everybody gets the opportunities they deserve. I just thought it was important to say a word about that. Thanks. Having said that, I am so glad to be in Kentucky today. As Jim mentioned, we had already a great visit earlier today in Breathitt County, where we saw what these transportation dollars are going to mean in Jackson, and that's both from a supply chain and transportation perspective, being able to expand Route 15, and from a resilience and safety perspective, being able to reinforce that dam. And that's exactly the kind of thing that, that is what motivated the bipartisan work to get this legislation through. And the same is true of this great project that we're celebrating right here in Lexington. I also want to remark that you can see the difference when you have good cooperation between the federal, the state, and the local level. And we saw that, especially in a lot of the partnerships that I know were born out of hardship in Breathitt County. We see it right here too, and I do think it helps when you have former mayors on the job in important roles in state and federal government too. But look, this is an opportunity to see in very real terms what President Biden's vision of investing in America really looks like, and we need it. I gotta tell you, I've been traveling the country looking at bridges, tunnels, roads, and so often what you see is the most cutting-edge, state-of-the-art transportation technology of the early 20th century. And you know, you look at this, and it's a great example. This railroad bridge was built 86 years ago. That's before just about all of us here were alive, and I'm sure that the way it was designed at the time made a lot of sense. But it's also clear that it needs a lot of improvement. It is just too low for trucks. On average, a truck a year crashes into it, costing in terms of time, money, and even lives. It creates those backups that the mayor talked about. The underpass is also too narrow, which means that there is no room for sidewalks or access to bus stops. That stops people from safely crossing, and that can cut off entire neighborhoods and communities from the access they need to get around to jobs and schools and essential resources. And it relies on outdated storm drain infrastructure, which means it contributes to flooding events, and there's a risk of runoff from those truck crashes I mentioned earlier, making it into the local aquifers. So it is long past time for a better solution. And as with so many other projects that I see as we go around the country, the community's known that for a long time. The community has had a vision, the mayor's had a vision, the neighborhood, the council members, everybody who comes together knows what needs to be done, but too often that vision has been deferred because of a lack of funding. That's why President Biden's bipartisan infrastructure law is so important. And that's why, thanks to your hard work and your strong application, I'm pleased to be here to officially announce that we are awarding Lexington $8 million for the Reconnecting Northland Arlington project. So what's this funding going to do? It's going to help replace this bridge with one that is taller, wider, and safer. It's going to add new sidewalks and bike infrastructure. It's going to improve that stormwater infrastructure. It's going to make bus stops more accessible. And most importantly, it's going to better connect the community so that people can access all of those resources and jobs and opportunities that Lexington has to offer. There is a lot to love about this project, and I want to commend the leaders involved for what you've done to make it possible, because again, that strong support from the community, the application you sent in, the letters from businesses, organizations, and leaders, the governor, who was, to put it politely, relentless in getting my attention on this, Panbowl Lake and other needs in the state, that really made a difference. Local nonprofits wrote about how the project could make it easier for people from low-income and underserved communities to get access to healthy food, as well as schools and healthcare, jobs, and essential services. Train and transit operators wrote about how this will improve safety and reliability, and how it makes it possible for more people than ever to get around the city affordably and conveniently. The water and sewer service wrote about how it would prevent fuel and dangerous chemicals from potentially making their way into Cane Creek and affecting the water supply here. And again, you had elected leaders, by the way, I would add, on both sides of the aisle, coming together around this project. You know, not every day that we see Leader McConnell, President Biden, myself, and a lot of others on the same page. But Leader McConnell also wrote to us in support of this project, and most importantly, joined President Biden and was one of those Republicans who crossed the aisle to work with Democrats to get this infrastructure law done in the first place, because it's just good policy. And I think that's a remarkable thing. And the even better news is this is one of 162 projects that we're announcing just this week, just through the RAISE program, supporting efforts in every state in the nation, including, as I mentioned earlier, Jackson, where they are still rebuilding after everything they faced, and where we know these dollars are going to make a big difference. Other places, we're replacing 9 outdated bridges in rural Iowa, strengthening the regional supply chain there and saving residents time on their commutes. In Philadelphia, we're adding crosswalks and pavement and traffic signals around half a dozen schools to make it easier and safer for kids to get to and from school. Just yesterday, I was in Orangeburg, South Carolina, a place of deep historical significance in the civil rights movement, celebrating a pedestrian bridge that's going to help pass over highways in a thoroughfare to better connect 2 HBCU campuses there to the downtown business district. And that's just to name a few. Some of these projects are in cities, some of them are in rural areas. 70% of them are in historically underserved communities. And we're able to fund more projects than ever now, thanks to the resources in the bipartisan infrastructure law. This was a very competitive round of applications, and so I want to emphasize one of the reasons you ought to be very proud here is that out of the $15 billion of requests that came in, we had to pick and choose with about $2 billion to work with. So even with that historically high funding we have, there was much more demand than there was funding, which means that only the most compelling projects were chosen. And again, that just speaks volumes about the leadership and the work that went into this application and just how much need there is. Now, there are going to be more opportunities for communities to get the funding they need to bring key projects to life. We have already announced funding for over 30,000 projects around the country, with more coming all the time. 2 years ago, right on the other side of the trains behind us, we were able to fund major improvements to the Central Kentucky Lines Railroad, including a new freight facility, track rehabilitation, switch replacements, and better grade crossings. Earlier this week, we announced 130 projects in over 40 states to build American-made buses with American workers, as well as funding for workforce training to make sure workers are ready to support the next generation fleets that we're equipping them with. Last Friday, we opened applications for a combined grant program funding everything from repairing small rural bridges to modernizing national landmarks. And very soon, we're going to open up applications for our Reconnecting Communities program, the first federal fund specifically designed to intervene in places where there are pieces of infrastructure dividing people from the jobs and resources they need and making those connections anew. And there's more good work where this came from. So I couldn't be more excited, more proud to stand with leaders here, to stand with you and to celebrate the work that's going to get done. And this will continue to drive our approach every community from one the size of Lexington to one the size of Jackson. Every project from one that's getting national news like the Brent Spence Bridge that we're also excited about to one that isn't going to be known to most people around the country, but it's going to make all the difference in the world to the people who count on it every day. That is why we're here. That's the power and the importance of transportation. And that's why there's a great deal to celebrate. So congratulations again to the community of Lexington on this fantastic news, and I look forward to seeing the results partnering with the state.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank you
very
so much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Treat. Thanks.
I think my phone's over there.
All right. Is it chirping? And we, I think, have just a moment for some questions from the media.
They're speechless.
Yeah. All right.
Can I introduce you
Please.
to the council members?
Oh, yes,
Do you
of
have
course.
time for
Yeah,
that?
yeah, of course. Yeah.
If they
All right.
have-
All set on the media front? Great. Thanks again for coming out, folks.